we noticed that there are students that wanted to learn psychology, but they were not ready for the rigor of an AP course.
Sure.
So in order to accommodate that, I had proposed and added, we just do an on-level high school psychology course. And so I have been teaching all psychology, like I taught all AP psychology for probably the last 10 years. And in the last 6, we've also added the on-level course.
You just heard Paula Hilton from the Cannon School in Concord, North Carolina. Garth interviewed Paula for episode 203 of Psych Sessions, Conversations about Teaching and Stuff.
Hi folks, this is Garth, and I want to tell you about an intro psych book from Sumo Learning. That's SOOMO. The book is called Psychology in the Real World by author Jennifer Harper. Psychology in the Real World encourages students learning along the way by providing frequent formative assessments all aligned with APA's themes and learning outcomes from the Intro Psych Initiative, all tagged so you can track their progress on those outcomes. It's got LMS integration and auto-grading and supplements like slides and test questions and notes, and it's affordable at only $50. So check it out. Go to sumolearning.com. That's SOOMO learning.com and get a preview of psychology in the real world.
The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter.
We know you want to reach every student in your course, to help every student individually succeed. But how do you find out what each student wants and needs? Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology offers a solution. Ask them. Achieve puts goal setting and reflection surveys in each course, where students share their aspirations, thoughts, and concerns about what they are trying to learn. Their responses help you tailor lessons and assignments and addresses both individual and class-wide needs. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.
Well, folks, it's my pleasure today to welcome Paula Hilton from Cannon School in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Cannon School is a private independent school. Is that right, Paula?
That is, yes.
Well, I know that because I learned, because you and I have talked once before on Intro Psych Sessions, season 3, and you told me a little bit about your school. So first of all, welcome. And second, could you just tell us a little bit about, just for folks who haven't heard that, what is Cannon School? Anything that, might be interesting to our audience?
Sure. So Cannon School, so obviously we have different types of school in the US. We have public school, and then we have private schools. So schools that families pay for their children to attend. And Cannon School is one of those. We do not have any religious affiliation. So we like to be called an independent school. So we're independent of the state and any other affiliation. And yeah, that's Cannon School.
All right. Okay. And what's the demographics of your school? And like how many students are there and where do they come from and those things?
Yeah, sure. So we are located just northeast of city Charlotte. And so we're in a really unique position compared to the other Charlotte independent schools, which are on the south side of the city. So our demographic, we have under 1,100 students, JK through 12. So on our campus, we have 4-year-olds all the way up to 18 and 19-year-olds on our campus. We have a general mix of students who are on financial aid to attend, and students who obviously pay the full price for admittance. And so I mean, yeah, so that's the basic dynamic. Many of our students are coming from, families that are, working class families, but we also have a good bit of our population that's also coming from, lawyers and doctors and that part of the populace.
Sure. And how long have you been there for?
So this is my 16th year at Canon.
Wow.
I've been teaching a total of 17 years, and I did 1 year at another independent school in South Carolina.
Okay. Well, cool. Like I am excited to hear this perspective because I don't think we've actually mentioned it yet, but you teach psychology at Canon School. And so I'm interested to hear your perspective because your perspective is maybe one that we haven't had. We've had high school teachers before. I don't think we've had private schools. And so I'm interested in talking some about that. But let me just give you a compliment because one of the reasons why we're talking today is that I've had the chance to talk with you a couple times and see you present. I think you presented at Psych 1, isn't that right? And then Coast to Coast. Did you do Coast to Coast as well, right? So,
yeah.
And your way of approaching teaching is it's a breath of fresh air. It's just really nice. Everybody can benefit from what you are doing, at any level. And your passion for teaching and the thoughtfulness of the way that you teach and present is inspiring. And so now I'm thinking exactly about what your demo was this last year, and it's got to be one of my favorites. So now people are like, what was it? So if people actually want to see it, they can go to Coast and they can pay to see the video of you doing it. But maybe can you just walk us through, if you remember, I can remind you,
yes.
But remind us, like, what was the point of that teaching demonstration and where'd you come up with that and what is it?
Right. So the first day of class is always such an important day. You got to get them hooked. You got to get them ready for your class. And in years past, in the almost 2 decades I've been doing this, there was always those days where, okay, well, we got to go through all the rules and we got to set them up for success. But that wasn't really setting them up for success. That was just reading a bunch of rules that we'll get to. But is it really necessary on day one? So I had come across, I forget exactly what spurred this. I don't know. I can't remember. Source amnesia, I suppose. But I came across Virginia Freed wrote an article in Faculty Focus about an icebreaker that sticks. I think it's what it's called. And she describes using the first day of school or the first day of class to go through this activity where you have this box, like this literal box. And in the article, she talks about it could be, pens and sticky notes and all kinds of random things in the box. And you go through basically, you show them what's in the box and you ask them, what did they remember and so on and so forth. But at the same time, you're doing this memory activity, you're integrating information about how memory works through that process, because they're going to need to be able to use their memory in this course, which has endless amounts of content that many of our students have never seen before. So it's like you're talking a foreign language to them from day one. So I took that activity, and I've done it in several different ways. I've done it where I've had an actual box and I had items that I just grabbed from around my house. So they were personal to me, so students could get to know me while we're doing this activity. And then what I did for Psych 1, I was like, well, nobody wants to know me at this conference. Like, it needs to be personal to the context. So I then modified it to a digital version where you can show them pictures. Again, some of these things I had in my classroom, some of them were personal, some of them I grabbed off of Google that were relevant to the content. So essentially, you're able to do the same thing, but when you talk about the different items in the box or what's being shown to them on the screen is relevant to the context of the course. And I'm also on a personal mission to bring the world of what we know about cognition and what we know about learning. We need to be teaching the students how they learn.
Yeah.
And so that activity allows you to start from day one teaching them how their brain works, and they can get real-time feedback. So you show them all the items during the first trial, and they write down as many as they think you can remember. And then you ask them, well, how many do you remember? That's their first data set. And then you do it 2 more times. And at the end, you also provide context to the items. And so the whole time they can see, hopefully, their numbers increase. So they have that in-class, real experience of doing the memory process and seeing it in real time for themselves. Like, oh, repetition helps. Oh, giving things meaning helps, so that hopefully they can translate that into the world of intro psych that, again, has endless amounts of content. So I think it's so important that we teach students how to learn while we're trying to teach them, stuff that we love to teach.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, we ask them to go drive a car, but we don't give them instructions on how the car works. Seems a little silly, right? Because when things break down, you're going to have to figure out how to fix it. And if you don't have the basic components to that, you're going to give up, and you're going to waste time. And I think we can do students a favor by helping them learn how to learn.
Yeah. The reason I love that demo, it was very easy, but like anything that it looks easy, it was really thoughtful and layered. Like it was easy and effective. And like anything that looks easy and is also effective, it was very thoughtful and it was layered. So these images on a like PowerPoint presentation, let's just say, I don't remember how many there were, but let's say there were 16. It almost corresponded, right, from like per one chapter of introductory psychology, right? And so now you're also giving students the framework of the coming course through these images. Now, you don't tell them that. First round is just kind of like not a lot of information. It's sort of like, how many can you remember? This is a fun strategy. But then by the end, you've taught them about retrieval practice. You have taught them about space practice. You have taught them about what's going to be in the course. And there's an amount of efficacy that students feel empowered. I felt empowered that this is going to work. As these rounds go on, I'm going to remember more, which, I think surprises students that they have it in them. And in fact, psychology can show you how to access some of that stuff in more strategic ways.
Yes. So I love how when I first did this with one of my classes, they came to me like mid-year. They're like, remember that first day of class activity? Like, I still remember those things. And I was like, what? So it really astounded me that they retain this information much longer than I imagined they would. With this year's class, I'm excited to use it as a review activity at the end. Like, I want to show them the images and I want them to tell me what they think they mean or what they remember about the context of the image. And those images I also tried to couple with major themes or bigger psych questions that we might ask. Like, one of them was a judge gavel. What works better, reward or punishment? So thinking about like outside of just our textbook, like how does it work in the real world? So I'm excited to see like what they remember at the end. And then they might remember something completely different, but at least they'll have some meaning connected to it. And I also love the idea, and I feel like I'm having more success when I give the ownership of the learning and I put it in my students' hands. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. So like I'm the coach, I'm sort of pointing you in all the right directions, but they have to take ownership of it. Like they have to do their part. And you get that when you show them that idea, that growth mindset. It's not like one kid can do intro psych and one kid can't. No, you all can. Some of you might just need different strategies to do it. Or you may need more time to do it as compared to your peers. So that's another part of that too. Like, look, everybody by the end of the activity can show growth, can show success. And who did that? They did that.
Yeah.
Psych Sessions can do what it does because of listeners like you. We want to thank you for your support over the years in our mission to get more free professional development to all teachers of psychology around the world. If you want to support us further by making a tax-deductible donation, please head to psychsessions.org/donations. Thanks for listening.
How much of your course looks as thoughtful as that activity? Because at Tip Northwest, when we bring people in for teaching demonstrations, we call it the Bring Your Best sessions, which is always interesting because you're getting people's best when they're presenting in front of people. But that's also I know even for myself, what I am presenting, I'm actually thinking most thoughtfully about. And because I'm creating the time to put something like that together. And then, of course, it works great in the class. And I wish I could do everything that way. Do you find the time to create these creative kind of like really great learning experiences for students? Or where do you find your activities?
That's a great question. So, I suppose there's a little bit of background. So when you teach at an independent school, when you teach something like psychology, you tend to be it. So I am the psychology teacher, the department, and the head chair, and all of that. I am housed in the social studies department, and I love my department chair. But when it comes to how to teach or what to teach, I'm taking a lot of what I'm learning from my colleagues. So whether it's activities, and I'm then going to harness it into a psych context. There's a lot of trial and error. I've been at this for the last 17 years. I can look back at different years and I was like, I didn't know what I was doing at all. And so being thoughtful and taking the feedback from the previous year and modifying it. I've also tried to take advantage of every professional development that's out there that I could get my hands on. So I've been to Clark University when Lee Garrell it was 2012 and he was there, and that was super special. I've been an AP reader, and so I've made connections through those folks there. I have done little mini professional developments along the way throughout North Carolina. And I'm within some social media networks with other professionals. That's really helpful. But I think what has been really key is that I work at a place that gives me autonomy, that allows me and trusts me to experiment and play around with different things. We've also, as a school, we've embarked on this journey. So we are, so I have started this, I don't know how to phrase this, but I was inspired by this organization in this book that I read. It's called NeuroTeach. And the organization is called the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning. And the directors are Glenn Whitman and Ian Kelleher, and they're out of Potomac, Maryland. And they talk about how to bring the science of learning into your classroom. And so as a school, we are on this is our second year into this, where we have learned more about how to run a classroom, everything from the aesthetics of your room and how your room is set up to the serial positioning effect with your lesson from start to finish. Where are you going to lose their attention and what do you do in the middle? So teaching our faculty, JK through 12, more about the science of learning, the more about the science of cognition and that kind of thing. So because of that journey we're on, I think that my lessons now are much more thoughtful. They're much more creative than I have in the past because I'm thinking of different things that are essential. Like I want my students to be up and moving. I need them to be speaking, not just me giving the information. I need to be thinking about the sequence of the day, like how many people like may sit down and like I can, tell my husband, like if someone wanted a lecture on sleep right now, I could do it. I could do it right here at this kitchen table. So I might be able to teach something like literally in my sleep, but I'm going to map out my class for the day. What's our warm up? We're going to break it into segments. What am I going to make them, chew on, or how am I going to chunk things in certain ways? So I'm much more thoughtful about my classes now than I think I ever have been in the past. Like you go back a decade and it was definitely more like, I'm going to lecture and I'm going to tell you the story of intro psychology. And now my kiddos come in and it's, what are we going to do with this information today? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard it said, by some folks, instead of thinking about what I'm going to do in class today, I'm thinking about what are my students going to do in class today. Just like switching not only the responsibility, but also making it a more active experience for them, right?
Right, absolutely. So I've also done a lot of reading. So I've just been trying to grow and learn my craft over the last almost 20 years. I read a book called Powerful Teaching. And I love the phrase that they use in that text. It's not, we think education is information in formation. We got to put all this information in our students' head. But it's not that at all. It's out formation. What our students say, what comes out of their mouths or what comes out of their hands, that's what they've learned, not what we push in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I try to think about that a lot. Like, what are my students producing during class versus just simply listening?
What did you get hired to teach psychology directly like 17 years ago?
Isn't that a great question? So, yes, I was hired to be a member of our social studies department, and I was hired to teach World 1, which is 9th grade world history, and AP psychology. It was a very unique position that had opened up at Canon. And I had experience in my previous school with teaching all of the social studies. That was an interesting year, but I had experience teaching all of it. And so they hired me, and AP Psych became, because it was an AP course, it became my primary course. And over the course, then over the first 5 years, the class would double every year. So I started with 20 students, and then the next year I had 40 and then 60. And right now I maintain about 50 to 60 students per year, which is a lot for an elective course. It's not a required course. They're all just elective.
So it is an AP psychology course then?
Mm-hmm. So okay. I teach AP, and then I've also added, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, we noticed that there are students that wanted to learn psychology, but they were not ready for the rigor of an AP course.
Sure.
So in order to accommodate that, I had proposed and added, we just do an on-level high school psychology course. And so I have been teaching all psychology, like I taught all AP psychology for probably the last 10 years. And in the last 6, we've also added the on level course. So I was hired to also teach some history, but now all I do is teach psychology.
Okay, and how many sections are you teaching?
So traditionally at Canon, a teacher teaches four sections of something, and just because of different things with our personnel, I'm teaching 5 this year.
Wow.
So 2 honors and then 3 AP. So that leaves me with about 77 students.
Okay. So your class sizes are 15, 20?
On average. So my biggest one is 21. And then I have a little baby class of 6. So they just fluctuate depending on the student's schedule.
Wow. Okay. So that's a good question. What does your 6-person class look like compared to your 20-person class? Do you adjust it at all? Are there any challenges associated with that?
So there's lots of challenges associated with it. I think the dynamic of the 6 is important. So that group of 6 and we have a really good working relationship. They have embraced the idea that we're in a really small class, so we're all going to get to know each other really well because you can't really hide, right? So that's really nice. I get to know them really well, and they're a great group of kiddos. The speed at which I can teach a 6-person class compared to the 20-person class is different. So you have to adjust for the timing of what I teach and how I teach it. And I also noticed that with my honors level class, we do a lot of projects. And so you can't really make a lot of groups when you have a class of 6. So more often than not, they have to work by themselves, or we have just little mini groups. That's the one part that I think makes the small class especially challenging, is getting them to get into groups and have little mini discussions before we break out into the bigger discussions. And in some cases, I just sort of cut out the middle and we just have a big group discussion instead. Whereas in the big group of 20 or 21, sometimes it's more advantageous for them to talk in their small groups before they want to talk to the big group. Like they want to practice it out with each other before they add to the whole class discussion. So speed, grouping, both those things I find to be a challenge depending on what we're doing.
How does assessment differ between the AP and the honors courses? Do you have, it seems to me that in the AP Psych, even in the curriculum, there's not a ton of flexibility because there's a test that has to be taken and it's going to cover certain things. So I imagine you have more flexibility with the curriculum with the honors course, but also I'm sure it makes assessment different. Or now, no judgment. If you do the same thing in both classes, that's probably, what I would do because that's easy. But, maybe you have some thoughts.
So assessment is different. So I treat AP as similar to a pretty structured college environment that they could get, but they're also high schoolers. So I have to also remember we're a bridge, right? Like we're not college, but we're not young high school students anymore. So we got to get ready for that next step. And for 99% of our population, they're headed to college and university. So in AP, we have tests, and they're time tests because that's also like what the AP exam is going to be. And I want them to be prepared. And they'll have 1 project per trimester, and we have 3 trimesters. So right now, my AP students just wrapped up their interview project that they do for me for T2 at the end of development. And they'll be turning in a portfolio. So they keep a portfolio all year and they turn it in each trimester for review. So very much that traditional type of classroom with a little bit of some fun extras. Honors is different. So I feel that I can follow the national standards for high school psychology pretty well, but I also get to pick what I want to teach, which I find to be super fun. And with the students that are in my honors psych class, they don't want the rigor. They're not there for that. They're there for, I want purpose. I want meaning. I want this to make sense for me now, or I want to understand the world a little bit better. And so we don't have any tests. They have reading quizzes that they can use their notes for if they want, but their main assessments come in the form of projects and presentations and research. So we really get to sort of spread our wings, and I'll cover half the amount of content in honors that I do in the AP level. Some things will overlap just because some things are important, like the learning chapter is important. We're going to cover it in both, and I'll do my best to diversify the activities in case a person takes both classes. But overall, the assessment piece is definitely different.
Do you have a favorite assessment, project, activity that you have students do in that course, or one that you want to share?
Sure. So in honors, well, I'll talk about what we're doing right now. So when we come back from the holiday break, we do a full unit on sports psych, stress, and health and wellness. And it takes us to the end of February. So it's a big chunk. We'll spend a bunch of time on sports psych. Then we'll move into the concepts on stress. And now we're talking about wellness and happiness. And my favorite thing to do with them, and it's only because I probably am slightly competitive, but when we come back, I ask them, okay, so we're learning about sports and we're learning about how movement is healthy for your body and your mind. So let's go out there and let's do something. So I asked them to do a 10K step challenge. So I'm asking them just go out and walk. And their goal each day should be to get 10,000 steps. And they can use their phone to track their steps because I don't know if you've noticed, but students don't go anywhere without their phone these days.
Yeah.
So it's bound to be on them. And some folks have a Garmin, or they might have an Apple Watch, whatever it might be. All they have to do is track their steps. And I make it competitive. So I make them a spreadsheet and everybody gets their own sheet so that you can look at other people's sort of scores for the day. So they can compare, what they're doing and how they're doing compared to their peers. And they just wrap that up. They did an analysis of that. They had to do a whole bunch of statistical things like make some graphs and what's the mean. And they had to look for trends in their data. And I love that activity, not simply because I win. I tend to win.
Yeah.
I got to get my steps in today. But I love it when the students come in and they'll say, guess what? I got 10,000 steps yesterday. Like they actually get excited about it, or when they reflect on it, they look at their trends and like, oh my gosh, I didn't move at all on Saturday. So they get some real live data about their actual behaviors. And for many of them, it's kind of eye-opening to see like what they do and what they don't do, because we all make assumptions about our own behavior, even if it's not true. So we just did that. So that's super fun. And then today I introduced to them a project. They're going to do a student teach project. So they get to become the teacher, and we're using the book Happiness 101 by Dr. Tim Bono. He's out of the Washington University in St. Louis. And he had actually visited and spoke at Canon to our community in 2022. So they're going to work in small groups. They get a chapter and they get to teach each other about the research behind wellness and what they need to do in order to stay well. So that's what we're doing right now, which is pretty cool.
I love it. I started introducing an assignment. I've brought more positive psychology into my course. It sounds like you have too. Just over time, I really like it. It's applied. My course probably is more like your honors course than it is like your AP course. Actually, it's definitely more like your honors course than it is like your AP course. But one of the things I did, like you, I wanted students to really start to apply some of this stuff. So this week I'll be in the classroom, but they won't be in the classroom because they are supposed to be, and they don't have to be on campus, but they're supposed to be listening to an hour-long conversation that I had with Ellen Langer on of mindfulness fame, and then they're supposed to leave their mobile phones somewhere off of. They're not supposed to take their phones with them. They're supposed to go have an hour walk. And practice mindfulness. But yeah, so these are like really important opportunities to give students that can I think about the 10,000 steps and that awareness that I didn't move today. that's really important to understand now versus 10 years from now. Or to like just to have that awareness to make maybe better decisions. And book smarts are different than experiencing it and having that data in your face, kind of reflecting on what does that mean about me? Am I the kind of person that doesn't move? Am I the kind of person who, might have health risk in the future because I'm not exercising? Those kinds of things.
And I remind students, it's not a judgment. Like, I'm not trying to make a judgment about their person. It's data. So it's not personal. And if you have emotions towards it, maybe put some action toward that emotion. So that's super fun. And I also do a similar activity in AP. So their first trimester project is a sleep study that they do on themselves. And that usually is very eye-opening for students, where they are like, I thought I was getting enough sleep, but then I just realized for the past week, I've only gotten 5 hours a night. And then I would binge on the weekend and wonder why Monday is so difficult. And I'm like, friends, let's look at the data. Let's see if we can have a little improvement there. And from my experiences in the past, usually that project it's pretty lasting. Like, they continue to think about it. They're obviously not tracking their sleep, but they'll continue to think about it throughout the year, and they'll keep bringing it up in different ways. So
how long do you have them tracking for? Is it just a week?
No, it is usually about 15 days.
Okay.
Enough for us to get some weekends in there. And just the way our school schedule runs, they also have some long weekends, so they get to see what their sleep is like when it's on unstructured time. So they get to see that as well. And I do it in the fall when we talk about biology. I put those two units together. So about 15 days.
That's so great. Paula, what is it about? I mean, you could just be a teacher who does your job well. There's lots of resources out there for you to teach psychology, adequately and to be a good teacher. But there seems to be like this intrinsic motivation in you to do more. I mean, I hear you are excited about your institution kind of getting to understand learning science and apply learning science broadly. I know that you're sharing your ideas with the national teaching community. Where do you think this comes from? Can't you just be a normal person who just goes to work and then just comes home and doesn't do, an hour-long interview at the end of the day with me after you've been teaching all day?
I mean, isn't that we just talked about motivation in AP? Isn't that the question?
Yeah.
Why do we do the things that we do? I have just I think it's part of it's my personality. Like, I'm very much an achiever. If there's goals, let's go ahead and go get them. I'm not very complacent. I can always do better. And I've been really inspired by colleagues that are also have a similar frame of mind. When someone visits Canon, they realize that we love what we do. Like, we have a purpose. Like, we want to do this, and we build each other up. And it's a really great community to be surrounded by other people that simply are not just doing a job, but this is their passion. Like, they actually want to get to know their students. They want to teach the content. They want their students to be successful. I think about motivation for all of this. I have, you always hear back from the alumni that had a really good experience. I don't often hear back from students that don't. And whenever someone emails or they stop in and they'll talk about the things that they remember or the things that they were able to use in another class, this past summer, I had a student who started the Air Force. No, he was ROTC for the Air Force. And he wrote me this beautiful thank you note at the end of the summer after he finished some basic training, just simply thanking me for the content that we covered, especially about learning, because his officers were also teaching him that content and how he felt like he was prepared for that type of experience. And that, those types of things, they I don't know. They just hit you just different.
Yeah.
When students will come back and they're like, well, and I still remember we did blank, and and just knowing that what you're teaching matters, that these students genuinely think highly of you, and that what you're showing them and what you're teaching them, actually you can make connections to lots of things in the real world. And it's not just stuff that we're just sort of filling their heads with that they're never going to think about again. And in many cases, it might just be this small little thing, but they're still gonna use it in life. And what a gift, what a blessing that is, to be in a spot where you can influence people for the good. You can show, you can share, I mean, intro psych does so many things that you can teach somebody about their internal self, about how they connect with other people, or how the world disconnects in certain ways. And I'm not sure, I know you can teach that in other classes, in other contexts, but psychology just hits on just the right notes and just the right places. And often I tell my students, this isn't just a class. This isn't just a college level class. This is about life. So let's talk about it. Let's dig into it. And my students are good people, and they equally inspire me in return. Like, they work really hard, and they want to do well. And I also feel that that ethical reciprocation. Like, I need to show up for them just as much as they're showing up for me. And I like this stuff. I like to learn.
Yeah.
I like to read. When I am, out, I'm a fairly athletic person. And so, a few days a week, I'll be out running. And what am I doing? I'm listening to psych sessions. I'm listening to Hidden Brain. I'm constantly doing my best thinking while I'm out there on a run. Or, grabbing the latest book, or, I'm just in it.
Yeah.
I'm in it. So, and I think the students respond really well when they see how passionate you are about what you're teaching.
Yeah, I have no doubt either that when those students come back to you and say thank you, that they are not just thanking you for the content, but they're thanking you for the way that you engage them, probably the respect that you have for them. I mean, there's something about that, the rapport you've built with them, that they'd feel comfortable and safe to come back and motivated to come back. Why go out of their way to send you those notes or to come back and say these things to you, right? But you've obviously, you care deeply. I think probably students know that. It's a bit of a long story, but with an engineer who I didn't know very well, but we were meeting for something else. And so I met him out for a drink in Seattle, and we got to talking, and he said, I actually went to Cascadia College. I said, no way. So we tried to do the timeline thing, and I missed him by years before I was there. And I said, so what do you remember about your experience there? And he said, well, there was this instructor. There's this engineering instructor. And he told me her name. I'm like, I know that person. And I was like, okay, well, tell me about your experience with her. And he said, it changed everything for me. It's why I'm an engineer now. So anyway, I forgot about it that was months ago. A couple of weeks ago, she happens to be by my office, walking by my office, and says hi. And I said, I just remembered a story. Let me tell you. So I tell her this story, and then she's just a pool of tears. It's just like, this is why we do it, right? And we don't know the impact that this can have on a student, especially psychology, but gosh, engineering. I think it's just that. It's that love of teaching. It's that respect of students, joining students in their learning. There's something that can really ignite a passion for, not only where they're going, but what they're going to do, what they're going to study, all those kinds of things. So I just hear a ton of that in your story as well. And And it's really nice that you get to kind of connect with students in 20-person classrooms because you get to know them, right?
We do. So at Canon, it is our job to know our students. We build good rapport and relationships with our students. That's just who we are. We also and when sorry, but what I'm just thinking about, like when a student isn't doing well, like we go and investigate. We don't just sort of like, oh, well, this kid just didn't show up today. We're actually concerned. We care about our students. And we can do that again. So we don't have hundreds of students. So we do have the time and the opportunity to interact with our students, even if it's just little moments in between classes. And, I do see them all year long. So that also opens up that opportunity to get to know them. And in some cases, I do get to teach them twice. So because of now having the high school level, some students will take that their junior year and then take the AP the following year. So I get to teach them twice. A decade ago or about 12-ish years ago, when I was teaching the World History 1, would have this unique experience where I teach them as a freshman, and then I get to see them again as a senior. So you get to see that growth over time, which was always super fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
And yeah, so that's part of our mission at Canon, is to know our students. And my children attend Canon as well. And it's amazing how much they love school and how much they feel loved at school, because people know them, people know who they are, and they want to get to know them in all their good days and all their bad days too. So Canon is definitely a special place in regards to student-teacher relationships.
How do you have, does teaching run in your family, or how did you get turned on to teaching in the first place? What was your bachelor's degree in? When did you know you wanted to be a teacher? All those kinds of questions.
I was waiting for you to ask this question, and I've been thinking about how I wanted to share this story.
Yeah.
So I am a first generation college student. So if that helps put into some context, I went to an itty bitty little school in upstate New York, very rural, and it became apparent that I was doing really well academically. I was going to finish valedictorian of my class. And I knew that simply just leaving high school and working wasn't really my journey, wasn't my path. So I had set myself out there into the world trying to figure out where I was going to go to college. And I knew that paying for college would be questionable. So I had applied to the Naval Academy. I had an ROTC scholarship. I had all the things. And as I think destiny helps sometimes, different doors closed. And I didn't want to make certain choices. So I ended up at St. Lawrence University, which is in upstate New York. It is a small liberal arts school, super awesome. I had a great experience there. And I went in thinking I was going to be a psych major. So the figurine of Lucy and Charlie from the Peanuts comic strip, I was going to be Lucy. That was that's what I was headed. And I had signed up to take all the psychology courses. And about sophomore year, we were asked to declare our major. So I went to my psych professor at the time, who was a developmental psych professor, great class, loved his class. We sat down, we chatted for about 30 minutes. And he asked some really great questions about what I was passionate about and what I wanted to do. What was I thinking about grad school, all kinds of stuff, which really got me to thinking. But at the end of the conversation, he didn't remember what my name was. So it was like I'm that really good student in your class that you have no idea who I am. And so that really made me wonder, am I in the right place? He also asked some really valid questions about what I was going to do with a psych major after college. And I didn't have a really good answer. And being a first generation college student, knowing I needed to have a job right away, grad school wasn't going to happen immediately, I didn't think that was a good plan, right? To major in something at the time. Like, I know better now, but at the time, I don't know if I had the resources to have made a really good decision. And that same semester, I was also taking a history course with Dr. Donna Elva. Love her. She became my advisor, and she knew who I was. Like, she knew my capability as a student, and she said, come on, come be a history major. And then, of course, I still was stuck. Well, what do you do with a history degree? And my school also had an education minor. It's really a major because I did the same amount of coursework for my education minor as I did for my major. And so at that point, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm gonna go teach. I'm going to be a history major, and I'm gonna go teach. And in New York State, when you do all the paperwork and all the testing to be certified, you essentially become certified in social studies. So you're able to teach all the different courses from econ to government to psych, social, all the things. And so that's what I did for my undergrad, and I did student teaching. So I had a really good opportunity to train and to have hands-on training as a teacher. And then when I moved to Charlotte, not too long after that, I got my master's degree from UNCC in history as well. And when my students ask me that, they're like, but you teach psychology? And I'm like, yes, friends, I teach psychology. I like to study people. It doesn't matter if they're in the present or they're in the past. Like, I just like to study the patterns of behavior and what they do and what they don't do and their motivations. And I had a lot of fun with my master's degree. I actually studied different topics that were relevant to psychology. So if I had written a thesis, I ended up taking an exam. I was gonna write about and research more about eugenics in North Carolina, and then the history of that here in our state. I studied warfare. I studied gender. I studied all kinds of stuff. But it was psych. If you dig hard enough, it connects directly to psych and PTSD. I studied that as well from a historical perspective. So that's sort of like the short version of the story.
Yeah.
And now to look back as to like where I am, it feels like I came like full circle. Like, I wanted to be involved in the psych world, and here I am teaching it and teaching it not just to my students, but to our faculty, and as of recently to additional people across the country. So
yeah, what a cool hybrid to have history and psychology. We're going to release an episode. It'll be out before this one will come out, but it's a conversation with Barney Bynes and Ken Keith and Sue Franz and myself when we were at a conference. And it's, a significant part of it is just about how, and Ludi Benjamin and I have talked about this as well, but it's just like the dying, how the history of psychology is dying. Like we're not training history of psychology professionals anymore. Those programs are dying. How do you, just with your love of history and your love of psychology, what do you think about that?
I think that's kind of sad, to be honest, because it's hard to understand where we are now. So, for example, when I teach students, so in AP, it's very siloed. So you have each unit is a different topic, like learning and biology and, motivation and stress and clinical, the cognition unit. And I try to show my students, at least with a timeline on the board, like where those units show up in the timeline of psychology, right?
Yeah,
so cool. With personality, we got to go back. So I show them on the timeline. We got to go back, to the late 1800s and talk about what life was like there and why he came up with the things he came up with. And then at what point on the timeline do we get cognition? Well, that's not going to show up for another 80 years later, all right? Or where do we get neuroscience? Oh, well, we got to have the technology to have that. So helping them to see how the content evolves and changes over time based on the timeline, I think is important. Recently, I read the book Shrinks, The Untold Story of Psychiatry by Jeffrey Lehman, which was really good. So if anybody wants to take a read there, I know it talks about psychiatry, but just learning about like where were we with therapy and how to treat people, not necessarily from a psychology point of view, but from that psychiatry point of view. It was brilliant to hear and see, at what point is psychoanalysis sort of falling out of favor versus other forms of treatment? When does medication come online? That kind of thing. So it makes me a little sad, and it feels like there's something missing if you don't have that, right? If you don't have the context for where it came from, or what happened before, or what happened after, it feels like it might fall a little shallow, I guess is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I will admit that I didn't understand what we would be missing without the history of psychology until I started having these conversations. I was just a little naive to it, but I think you're right. And I've seen it now that I'm looking for it, I do see it, and especially in things that I'm reading this book called Awe right now, the emotion of awe, AWE. And I didn't realize how recent in our recent psychology history, motivation and emotion are in like research. And then awe, like these kind of maybe lesser studied emotions, or more difficult to pin down. They're really recent. I didn't realize that. I just read Elliot Aronson, the social psychologist's autobiography, and the things that I'm teaching my students in my research methods class about mundane realism and experimental realism. These were his ideas, and because somebody asked him to write down how he runs experiments, and so it's just it also just brings these things to life in these stories, in real people's lives, solving problems in psychology, helping us to understand human behavior and thought processes, right? It's very, very interesting. And this is so foreign to me. I was not a history major and I was not interested in history. So I'm envious that you were naturally curious about these things.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too that I find really fun, and I don't know if I teach this as well, but I have to remind my students, and I try to as much as possible, that the researchers, the people that we're studying are people. They're not theories, and that they all live in the same world. So they're going to different conferences, they're friends, they're enemies. And in some case, some of them are lovers, and they're real people, and the things that they're studying and the things that they're researching, they have a motive. They have a personal motive, like, digging the stuff about Harry Harlow. And it's like, oh my goodness, there's so much to unpack. And I think history reminds us of that in some cases, that these aren't just these people who are famous because they have some theory or they have some term tacked to their name or some famous experiment, but they're real people. They're motivated to do these things because of the real life that they're living, which I think is also helpful in the context.
It's so fun to me that you mentioned Harry Harlow, because we have an unreleased story told by Ludi Benjamin about Harry Harlow. And I think we're going to end up putting it on our Patreon site for people to download, because it's a great story anyway, but it's the human side of Harry Harlow. And outside of the lab, just who he was as a person, which was very interesting. Anyway, so tell me about what are you doing next? You're now presenting at these national conferences, and what do you want to do in psychology?
That's like $1 million question.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I feel like I've been on this interesting journey that I have made my own luck. I've worked really hard and put myself out there, applying for the Psych 1 conference was a little scary. That was a lot of my comfort zone at Duke, and getting feedback from those professors. That was new, right? And then going and actually presenting was fun, but also a bit nerve-wracking. I've also worked with College Board. I don't know if I've mentioned that either. So in 2019, they had released the latest redesign for AP Psych, and I had actually been invited to be on that team, and we helped to create the CED, which is this big document that helps a teacher figure out how to teach the course. That was super fun. I don't know if I ever want to dive back in with them again, but that was super fun. Right now, I'm just thinking about the end of February, getting my students through this second trimester. And at our school, in a couple of weeks, we're hosting our own in-house conference. So our teachers are going to present like at an actual conference. Our academic deans have made like a website, and it, get to sign up for sessions, and it's super fun. And so I'll be teaching my colleagues a session on sleep. And then I'm also been working on this little side project. I do a process of reassessment in my classroom where students are able to take a test, go through a process, and then reassess. So take the test again in order to earn points back. It's a little more complicated than that. And I've collected data over the past 3 years on my students and how they have performed. So I'll be doing a session on that, talking about what is reassessment, what were my fears going into it, and what data have I collected that may either disprove those fears or we're still undecided. So that one's pretty exciting to dig into that. Reassessments doesn't feel like it's everyone's word. Like it tends to be one of those that gets people real fired up real fast. And I'm going to talk about it from the sense of belonging and the sense of, cognitive processing, like how long it may take a person to actually learn something, and second chances and the importance of that in life. So that's what I'm currently working on. I might go back to Psych 1 and propose some more thoughts there, but I don't know. I don't know where I'm going next is the honest answer here at this point. I may not actually know what other opportunities are out there. And I'll also have to say too that I have littles at home. So I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And I feel like we are kind of like in a really good groove with life and work and that life balance. And so I'm also being very mindful of what I choose to do because it isn't always practical for me to, pack up and head off to, a conference someplace across the country for a long weekend when I know my family needs me at home. So, So I'm not sure. It may be a few years down the road before we keep going, but I don't know. I'm open to opportunities and ideas.
It's really interesting. When you're ready, there's going to be a place for you for sure, probably to do whatever you want. I'm just going to predict that you're going to get poached by somebody to do something. You're just going to get picked up because I think you're just such an asset to teaching and learning. And so, wherever you put those energies, it's going to be beneficial to people. So I also love, just if folks are listening and they're thinking about how to get involved, I love that you are starting with your kind of values and looking kind of at home first and what you're able to do and what you want to do. I think some people I'll just say for me, you just get on the treadmill and then it just keeps speeding up with new opportunities, and you want to say yes to everything. And before you know it, you're maybe a bit maxed, and then and not doing your work according to what those values are. So I just love it. It's wisdom to me. So but whenever you are ready, I'm sure that STP, Psych 1, wherever you decide to put your efforts, it will be it'll be welcome. So anyway.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited for opportunities. I'm also excited just to be here and work with my students and work with my colleagues, and I'm open to opportunity. I'm just not quite sure where it's going to lead me next.
Yeah. Well, Paula, thank you so much for sitting down. It was great just talking teaching with you, which is easy to do with you because you love talking about teaching. So thanks for joining me. And I want to wish you the best at getting your students to the end of February and getting yourself to the end of February. And thanks for taking the time.
Yes, anytime. Thank you, Garth.